If you wanted to buy a house in New York today, your mortgage rate is like directly tied to the fact that money is no longer free in Japan.
Right. For the first time in over 30 years, yeah.
Exactly. And if you are trying to figure out why your grocery bill in Colombo spiked this morning, you actually have to look at two exploding oil ships thousands of miles away.
Because everything is connected. It really is.
It is. Welcome to this deep dive, an RTV Global Network production. I am host speaker, and sitting across from me is our resident analyst, expert speaker. But enough about us, right? Let's talk about you, the listener.
Because you're the one sitting right at the center of this this incredibly complex web.
Yeah.
You're feeling all these vibrations in your daily life, and you're just trying to make sense of the noise.
Right. And today is Wednesday, July 22nd, 2026. And I have to say, if you're feeling a bit overwhelmed by the sheer velocity of the news cycle today, you are absolutely not alone.
Not at all. I mean, the stack of events today is just massive.
It's towering, really. We're talking about really intense geopolitical conflicts, high-wire economic acts over in Sri Lanka, the emotional whiplash of a crazy World Cup, and some deeply pressing health crises.
Yeah, it's a lot to process.
It is. But we aren't just going to read you the headlines today. We are going to, trace the hidden plumbing behind them. We're going to explain the mechanics of how a decision in one capital literally forces a crisis in another.
It's about finding that signal in the noise,
Yeah.
right? We need to understand not just what is happening, but the specific mechanisms of, why it actually matters to you.
Absolutely. Okay, let's unpack this. And to understand the chaos of the global markets today, we actually have to start with what sounds like, honestly, the most boring piece of financial news imaginable.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, the Bank of Japan, the central bank over there, just raised its main interest rate to 1%.
Right.
Now, I read that headline and thought, 1%? Who cares?
Yeah.
I mean, my credit card charges 20 times that. Why is a 1% interest rate in Tokyo causing panic alarms to ring on Wall Street and in London?
I mean, I don't blame you for glossing over it, but that 1% is an absolute earthquake.
Really? Just 1%?
Oh, yeah. To understand why, you kind of have to look at the history of Japan's economy. Because for 3 decades, Japan has been stuck in what economists call the lost decades.
Right. Just intense economic stagnation.
Yeah, and deflation.
Yeah.
So to fight that, the central bank pushed interest rates to 0, and sometimes even, into negative territory.
Wait, negative? Like they would literally pay you to borrow money?
Essentially, yes. They basically made borrowing money completely free to force people to spend it. So if you were a major financial institution, you could borrow Japanese yen at basically 0 cost.
Okay, wow.
Now imagine you are a savvy global investor. You look at Japan and say, hey, I can borrow $1 billion worth of yen for free. But you don't invest it in Japan because their economy is completely stagnant.
Right, so you take it somewhere else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You take that free Japanese money, you convert it to US dollars or euros, and you invest it in American tech stocks or high-yielding emerging market bonds or real estate in London.
I see. You borrow for free and you invest where the returns are at what, 5, 6, or 7%?
Yeah, and you're just pocketing the difference. It's called the carry trade.
The carry trade, okay.
And for years, it has been this massive silent engine of global liquidity. I mean, literally trillions of dollars have been pumped into the global system this exact way.
But today, the Central Bank of Japan finally turned off the tap, right?
Exactly. What's fascinating here is that by raising rates to 1%, which, by the way, is the highest since 1995, borrowing in yen is suddenly expensive.
So all those global investors are panicking.
Total panic. They have to sell off their tech stocks, sell their foreign bonds, and buy back yen to pay off their newly expensive loans. Capital is rushing back to Japan, and money is just being violently sucked out of the global system.
Oh, wow. So it's basically a massive global margin call.
Yes, exactly. The era of free money is officially dead.
And that tightening of global cash is happening at the absolute worst possible moment because the physical, real-world supply of energy is simultaneously catching fire.
Yeah, the situation in the Middle East is escalating rapidly.
Right, the U.S.-Iran war escalation. I mean, the financial numbers alone are staggering. According to Hegseth, the war has cost the U.S. $37.5 billion so far.
That's incredible.
And that is an $8 billion increase just since May, and the Pentagon is already seeking billions more. But, beyond the ledger, the physical reality is that Iran is reporting 2 oil tankers have exploded and are completely immobilized right in the Strait of Hormuz.
And we really have to be precise about the geography here to understand the leverage at play. The Strait of Hormuz isn't just like a regular shipping lane.
No, it's a massive bottleneck.
Right. It is a geographic bottleneck. It's this incredibly narrow channel between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. Roughly 20% of the world's total oil consumption passes through that specific narrow stretch of water.
It's basically the jugular vein of the global energy supply.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to put it. When you have 2 massive oil tankers exploding and immobilized in that choke point, it sends a total shockwave through the entire global petroleum market.
I mean, insurance premiums must be through the roof.
Unimaginable levels. Any vessel daring to enter the region is facing unsustainable insurance costs. So shipping companies delay or completely reroute their fleets all the way around Africa, which, adds weeks to delivery times.
Right. So the immediate physical supply of energy to Europe, to Asia, and beyond is suddenly just choked off.
Exactly.
But here's the thing. With the U.S. sinking nearly $40 billion into this and shipping practically stalled, we are seeing a really unexpected diplomatic move. Pakistan is stepping in to mediate.
Yeah, that caught a lot of people off guard.
Right, and I have to push back on this because I'm looking at Pakistan's domestic situation. They're dealing with their own massive economic crises, political instability, you name it. Why on earth are they stepping into the middle of a blazing U.S.-Iran standoff? Like, what is their angle here?
It's a great question because it does seem totally counterintuitive, right? But Pakistan is acting out of pure geographic and economic necessity.
Ever so.
Well, they share a long, highly porous border with Iran. If Iran descends into a full-scale total war, millions of refugees will flood across that border into Pakistan.
And their economy just can't handle that right now.
Absolutely not. Their fragile economy would collapse. Furthermore, Pakistan has a historically complex, deeply embedded military and diplomatic relationship with the United States.
Oh, so they're like the only ones who can realistically pick up the phone and talk to both sides right now.
Precisely. Direct communication between the U.S. and Iran has completely deteriorated. There's just no back channel left. So Pakistan is stepping in to offer that back channel, not out of, altruism, but because a regional conflagration in the Persian Gulf would destroy Pakistan's own domestic energy supply.
They're basically trying to put out a fire in their neighbor's yard before the wind blows the sparks onto their own roof.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
It is a terrifying diplomatic tightrope. And just as a quick reminder to you listening, we are analyzing the mechanics of these events and the immense global stakes. Here we're absolutely not taking a side.
Right, we're just watching the chessboard and analyzing the moves.
Exactly. And speaking of shifting chess pieces during wartime, let's pivot over to Eastern Europe. In Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky has made a monumental restructuring move. He has officially sacked Ukraine's top army commander, Oleksandr Syrsky, following days of intense civilian protests.
Yeah, and changing your commander-in-chief in the middle of a protracted existential war? I mean, that is one of the most high-stakes gambles a leader can make.
It really is.
It speaks to a deep systemic friction. And the key detail here is the protests, right? The pressure for this change isn't just coming from tactical disagreements on the front lines.
No, it's domestic.
Right. It is emanating from the domestic populace, the civilian population who are enduring the absolute brunt of a war economy, constant air threats, and, mobilization. They are voicing their exhaustion.
It really highlights the sheer crushing pressure of wartime leadership. You aren't just fighting an enemy military, you are constantly fighting to maintain the morale and the consent of your own people.
Absolutely.
But, the friction today isn't just military, it's heavily economic. Let's look across the Atlantic. U.S. President Donald Trump has just slapped a massive 50% tariff on a wide range of Canadian goods. 50%.
Yeah, that number is staggering.
In response, Carney has vowed to intensify trade talks.
We really need to put that 50% number in perspective. Because in international trade, a tariff of, say, 5% or maybe 10%, that's used like a speed bump. It's meant to slightly slow down foreign competitors just to protect a specific domestic industry. But a 50% tariff is not a speed bump. It is a solid concrete wall built directly across the highway.
Yeah.
It is a fundamental disruption of one of the most integrated bilateral trade relationships on the entire planet.
I was reading about the auto industry specifically with this. The supply chain is so intertwined that a single car part might cross the U.S.-Canada border like 5 or 6 times before the vehicle is actually finished.
Exactly. The engine block might be cast in Canada, right? Then it's machined in the U.S., assembled into a subcomponent back in Canada, and then put into the final car in Michigan.
So when you drop a 50% tariff on that border, you are taxing that same piece of metal every single time it crosses the line.
Every single time. The final cost of that car will skyrocket, and those costs are inevitably passed down to the consumer. So Carney's response to intensified trade talks is basically highly sanitized diplomatic speak for an absolute scramble to prevent a total economic decoupling.
It forces Canada into a highly defensive, incredibly vulnerable posture.
It does.
And this sense of structural fracture is, honestly, it's echoing everywhere today. In the UK, Andy Burnham has officially become the Prime Minister, and he is coming out swinging with a mandate to, quote, rebuild Britain.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in India, we are seeing major opposition figures, Rahul Gandhi and Priyanka Gandhi Vadra, being detained by Delhi police amid intense protests right near the Prime Minister's residence.
When you lay all these events out, the UK, India, Ukraine, North America, the common thread is profound political volatility, right?
Yeah.
And a massive demand for structural overhaul.
Yeah, absolutely.
Burnham's language about rebuilding suggests an acknowledgement that the post-Brexit economic and social foundations need a ground-up restoration. And in India, seeing high-profile opposition leaders detained at protests of this proximity to the Prime Minister's residence, it tells us something very specific about the political climate.
It tells us that the debate isn't happening in the parliament anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When the primary opposition figures are on the streets facing detention, it means the political discourse has physically relocated from the legislative chambers out into the public squares.
Wow.
It is a manifestation of deep political polarization, which, again, we must view objectively as analysts. It shows a highly charged atmosphere where traditional institutional avenues are being completely bypassed for direct physical protest.
So, if you are keeping score at home, we have the global energy supply physically choked in Hormuz, the era of free money completely ending in Japan, a massive trade wall going up in North America, and deep political churn in Europe and Asia.
That's a lot.
It is. Now, imagine you are a policymaker in a developing, recovering economy trying to survive this global hurricane. This brings us to Sri Lanka's economic tightrope.
And tightrope might honestly be too gentle a word. They are trying to walk a razor blade right now.
Let's look at the local shield being raised. The Central Bank of Sri Lanka, the CBSL, had their Monetary Policy Board meeting, and they decided to keep the overnight policy rate unchanged at 8.75%. And they didn't hide their reasoning at all. They directly cited the renewed Middle East tensions and the resulting spike in petroleum prices as exactly why they froze the rate.
This is a really fascinating look at the mechanical levers of an economy. The overnight policy rate is the baseline interest rate at which the central bank lends money to commercial banks.
Okay.
By freezing it at a relatively high 8.75%, they are intentionally keeping the cost of borrowing expensive for everyday citizens and businesses.
But wait, why would they want borrowing to be expensive? I mean, don't you want businesses to borrow money to expand, build factories, hire people?
Yeah.
Especially in an economy that is trying to recover.
In a vacuum, yes, absolutely. But they are looking at the horizon. They see those exploding oil tankers in the Strait of Hormuz. They know the cost of importing fuel into Sri Lanka is about to skyrocket.
Right.
And look at the local data. June headline inflation in Sri Lanka has already jumped to 6.5%. If the central bank were to lower interest rates right now, it would encourage people to take out loans and spend more money.
Oh, I see. And more money chasing the same amount of goods causes prices to rise even faster.
Precisely. So lowering rates would basically be throwing gasoline on an inflation fire that is already burning at 6.5%. They have to prioritize price stability over rapid economic expansion.
They are putting the economy in a defensive crouch to absorb the shockwave coming from the Middle East.
That's exactly what it is, a defensive crouch.
And, you can see the friction of this defensive crouch playing out in the corporate world almost instantly. The Lanka IOC Q1 reports just came out today.
Yeah, I saw those.
They show that even though the company saw revenue gains from higher retail fuel prices, those gains were completely wiped out by immense cost pressures.
It proves a crucial economic reality, which is that inflation is a double-edged sword for corporations. Yes, Lanka IOC might be selling their fuel for more rupees at the pump, but the underlying operational costs, chartering the ships, paying the skyrocketing insurance premiums to get through the Middle East, managing the logistics, those are rising so fast that their actual profit margins are shrinking.
And the stock market is completely reflecting this anxiety, isn't it? The Colombo Stock Exchange ended on a very mixed note today. The all-share price index closed lower despite a strong start to the day.
Yeah, it was a rocky session.
But the detail I really want to dig into is this. The financial reports noted that crossings dominated the market activity. For the listener who isn't glued to a Bloomberg terminal every day, what exactly is a crossing, and why does it matter that they dominated the market?
It's a vital indicator of market psychology. A crossing is essentially a prearranged, massive block trade of shares between two major institutional investors.
Okay, so it's not happening on the open floor.
Right. It's negotiated off the open public trading floor, and then it's simply executed through the exchange to make it official. When crossings dominate the daily activity, it tells us something very loud about everyone else.
Which is?
It means that the everyday retail investors, the smaller traders, are completely sitting on the sidelines. They're looking at the 6.5% inflation, they're looking at the central bank freezing rates, and they are holding onto their cash.
They're too scared to buy.
Exactly. They are too scared to buy. The big institutions are just quietly rearranging their massive portfolios among themselves. It indicates a market that is collectively holding its breath.
But here's the part that blows my mind. While the local market is holding its breath and crouching defensively, the government is executing these massive financial obligations.
Yeah, it's quite the balancing act.
The Ministry of Finance has announced plans to repay a staggering $1 billion in foreign debt this year.
Wow.
And they managed to match that same billion-dollar repayment last year. At the exact same time, the Asian Development Bank just approved $200 million in emergency assistance for Sri Lanka's post-cyclone Ditwa recovery.
It is an incredible paradox of governance.
Yeah.
You are bleeding capital to service historical foreign debt. You are borrowing emergency capital just to rebuild from a literal natural disaster. And you are trying to suppress a domestic inflation spike all at the same time.
Right. So with all of that weight pulling them down, how are they actually planning for the future? Because the government just unveiled a national export development plan with a target of $36 billion by 2030.
Yeah.
I have to be honest, to a listener struggling to buy vegetables because of the 6.5% inflation, a $36 billion export target sounds like an absolute pipe dream. Is it just numbers on a whiteboard?
If it were just a policy paper, yeah, it'd be a pipe dream. But to evaluate if it is realistic, we have to look for physical, concrete movements. You cannot export $36 billion worth of goods if you physically cannot load them onto ships.
Right. The logistics have to be there.
And that is why the announcement that the International Finance Corporation and HSBC are jointly investing $40 million to upgrade the Colombo port infrastructure is the linchpin here.
Ah, so they are actually pouring concrete.
Yes. They are expanding the physical capacity of the port, and it connects directly to the internal logistics network. We are seeing the global trucking giant Dongfeng launching heavy operations in Sri Lanka, partnering with Euromotors.
Okay, so the trucks move the goods to the port.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you want to increase manufacturing, you need massive fleets of trucks to move raw materials from the rural areas to the factories, and from the factories to the newly upgraded Colombo port. The Dongfeng launch is the physical manifestation of this export strategy.
But moving goods requires energy, and, attracting those foreign factories used to require massive tax breaks. Both of those paradigms are shifting rapidly.
Very rapidly.
The government is frantically revising power generation plans to significantly boost the share of renewable energy. And at the same time, we're seeing reports that traditional tax holidays are losing their edge due to new global investment rules. What exactly changed here? Why can't Sri Lanka just offer zero taxes to a foreign company to build a factory here anymore?
This is one of the most profound shifts in global economics in a century, honestly.
Yeah.
It's driven by the OECD's push for a global minimum corporate tax. Historically, developing nations like Sri Lanka used tax holidays as their primary weapon. They would tell a multinational, hey, come build your factory in our export zone, and we legally promise you won't pay a single cent of corporate tax for 10 years.
It's a huge incentive. I mean, why wouldn't a company take that?
They would. But under the new global rules, a floor has been set, usually around 15%. Here's the mechanism. If a multinational company operates in Sri Lanka and pays zero tax because of a holiday, their home countries say, The U.S. or Germany will now look at their books and say, you didn't pay the global minimum of 15% in Sri Lanka. Therefore, we're going to tax you that 15% right here at home to make up the difference.
Wow. So the tax holiday is completely useless for the company.
Completely useless.
They're paying the 15% either way. It just
Yeah.
means Sri Lanka's government is voluntarily giving up tax revenue and handing it over to a wealthy Western government.
Exactly. The incentive is completely neutralized. So Sri Lanka realizes they can't just rely on a race to the bottom with cheap taxes anymore.
So if the taxes are roughly the same everywhere, how do they compete?
You compete on infrastructure, hence the $40 million port upgrade.
Yeah.
And you compete on green energy because massive multinationals now have internal mandates to power their supply chains with renewables. Sri Lanka is basically being forced into a much more mature structural economic strategy.
And a mature strategy requires absolute domestic stability, which explains why the government was so aggressive today in dismissing false claims regarding reforms to the Employees' Provident Fund and the Employees' Trust Fund.
Right, the EPF and ETF rumors.
When the everyday citizen feels economically squeezed by 6.5% inflation, any rumor that the government is going to tamper with their retirement savings can cause instant mass panic. They had to squash those claims to keep the society stable while they walk this tightrope.
But, societal stability isn't just about suppressing rumors. It requires a foundation of absolute accountability.
Yeah.
You can build all the multi-million-dollar ports you want and sign all the international logistics deals you want. But if the state apparatus is leaking from the inside due to corruption or gross mismanagement, the everyday citizen will never see the benefit of that $36 billion export target.
Which is the perfect bridge into the massive wave of legal and political churn happening right now. Let's look at the institutional reforms. There is a new parliamentary rule that just went into effect.
Yeah, this is a big one.
The reports from the Committee on Public Enterprises, known as COPE, and the Committee on Public Accounts, COPA, can now directly trigger the Criminal Investigation Department, the CID and bribery probes.
It's a monumental shift.
Now, I want to dig into this because for years I've read the news and you see these COPE committees hauling in officials. They uncover blatant mismanagement, missing funds, drastically delayed annual reports. In fact, state entities are facing heat today over delayed reports.
Right, constantly.
But historically, it always felt like a theater production. A report would be published, the media would yell for 2 days, the report would gather dust on a shelf, and absolutely nothing would happen. What is the actual mechanical difference now?
The mechanical difference is the total removal of the political shield. Previously, COPE was an investigative body without prosecutorial teeth. They could uncover that millions of rupees were missing, but to actually prosecute, the findings had to be painfully routed through various political and bureaucratic layers, where allies could easily stall or completely bury the evidence.
Right, it just got lost in the system.
Exactly. The new reform acts as a direct legal tripwire. If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's a massive deal.
So a bad audit literally auto-generates a police investigation.
Essentially, yes. If COPE finds gross financial irregularities, that report now acts as the direct mandate for the CID or the Commission to investigate allegations of bribery or corruption to open a criminal file. It changes the psychological calculus for every single state employee. Delaying an annual report is no longer just an administrative annoyance that gets you yelled at in a committee room. It can now legally be construed as an attempt to hide financial evidence, which brings armed detectives to your office.
And we are seeing the detectives mobilizing in unprecedented ways, both locally and internationally. Let's look at the high-profile probes making headlines today. A joint CID and bribery commission team has physically flown to Australia regarding the massive Airbus scandal.
And we must observe these movements purely as factual reporting of the legal process, of course.
Of course.
But the logistics of this speak volumes. The Airbus scandal involves highly complex international financial transactions, shell companies, and cross-border money movement. The fact that a joint Sri Lankan team has flown to Australia shows that the legal apparatus is no longer restricted by its own national borders.
It's serious intent.
Very serious.
Yeah.
It is a level of well-funded prosecutorial intent that aligns perfectly with the new teeth given to the parliamentary committees.
It is a dragnet, and it is catching high-profile local names as well. The son of former State Minister Shanta Bandara has been arrested by the Kolpeti police over an alleged 20 million rupee robbery.
Right.
The Bribery Commission has launched a formal probe into former Minister Akila Viraj. And down south, the Matara Chief Magistrate has reissued an arrest warrant for former Minister Basil Rajapaksa for failing to appear in court.
What is remarkable here is the spectrum of the accountability. You have international corporate corruption being pursued on a completely different continent. You have allegations of direct, blunt force physical robbery in Kolpeti, and you have the most basic requirement of the justice system answering a court summons being strictly enforced in Matara against a deeply entrenched political figure.
It sends a very clear signal.
It sends a chilling signal across the spectrum of power, honestly. Proximity to a ministry is no longer a guaranteed, impenetrable shield against the legal process.
And this intense legal churn is mirrored by severe political fracturing inside the parliament itself. A no-confidence motion against the justice minister was put forward, but it was conspicuously skipped by key opposition MPs.
Yeah, that was very telling.
Meanwhile, MP Ramanathan Archuna has publicly stated he's spending his, quote, last days in parliament.
The dynamics of that no-confidence motion are highly revealing of the internal state of the opposition right now. In a parliamentary democracy, a no-confidence motion is the absolute heaviest weapon the opposition wields.
It's meant to topple leadership.
Exactly. To call for it and then have key members intentionally not show up for the vote suggests a deeply fractured opposition. It implies back-channel negotiations and internal power struggles that the public just cannot see.
And what about MP Archuna's statement?
As for his statement, it really reflects the personal toll and disillusionment that often accompanies these periods of intense, aggressive institutional reform. When the unwritten rules of Parliament change, some players simply realize the new environment is no longer tenable for them.
While the political structures are undergoing this massive chaotic renovation, the government is also trying to push through immediate functional policy changes on the ground. The cabinet has just approved drafting a new Sri Lanka foreign employment law to finally replace the highly outdated 1985 Act.
This is a desperately needed modernization. I mean, the nature of foreign employment has evolved light years since 1985.
Oh, absolutely.
The new law is expected to shift focus from the manual labor exports of the 1980s to the protection of migrant workers' legal rights, standardizing recruitment fees to prevent horrific exploitation by middlemen, and, adapting to the skilled labor demands of the 2026 global economy.
We're also seeing the state acting as a primary buyer to stabilize volatile local markets. The government has purchased over 1,900 metric tons of paddy just since July.
That's a massive intervention.
It is. At the same time, the Consumer Affairs Authority is cracking the whip on a ground level, conducting emergency raids on 112 shops and restaurants near bus stands specifically for consumer law violations.
Right, going after price gouging and food safety.
Yeah. And on a purely structural, constitutional level, there's a serious debate regarding the judiciary. The argument that Supreme Court and Court of Appeal judges' age shouldn't arbitrarily dictate the termination of their service.
All of these actions, the massive state purchasing of paddy to artificially stabilize agricultural livelihoods, the aggressive raiding of bus stand shops to ensure everyday commuters aren't being poisoned or price gouged, and debating the mandatory retirement age of the highest legal minds in the country, they are all threads of the same societal effort.
Which is what?
They represent a nation trying to rapidly reestablish trust and functionality in its institutions, from the price of a meal at a local bus stand to the supreme laws of the land.
We spent the last half hour talking about billions of dollars, interest rates, international trade wars, and parliamentary maneuvers. But policy ultimately hits the ground.
Yeah, it always does.
And when bureaucratic systems fail, the cost isn't measured in lost tax revenue or delayed exports, it's measured in human lives. And I have to warn the listener, the news we are about to cover is incredibly heavy today. We have to start with the absolute devastation at the Homagama factory.
That's a terrible tragedy.
5 people, including very young workers, were killed in a horrific fire at a safety helmet manufacturing factory in the Katuana industrial zone.
It is a profound, senseless, and just heartbreaking loss of life. As analysts, our incredibly grim responsibility is to look at how a tragedy of this magnitude occurs within the regulatory system.
Right.
Labor Deputy Minister Mahinda Jayasinghe has ordered a full, urgent probe. But the most damning detail has already emerged from the Central Environmental Authority.
Which is?
They revealed that this specific factory had failed to renew its environmental license.
See, this is exactly where I want to focus. It is a devastating loss of life, But it is clearly not just a freak, unforeseeable act of God. The environmental license wasn't renewed. How does a bureaucratic gap, a missing piece of paper, a delayed signature on a form lead to actual physical fire and death for workers?
Because an environmental license is not just a piece of paper or a bureaucratic tax. It is a physical mandate of safety. The process of getting that license renewed requires a physical inspector to walk the floor of that factory.
They have to see it with their own eyes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They check for the safe storage of highly volatile chemicals, they check for adequate explosive-proof ventilation, and they check waste management protocols. A safety helmet factory is essentially a building filled with highly flammable plastics, industrial resins, and chemical adhesives.
Like a tinderbox.
Yes. When a factory continues to operate without that license renewal, it means they are operating completely outside the safety oversight net. The bureaucratic gap is the literal absence of a trained inspector looking at a pile of highly flammable chemical waste stored entirely too close to an electrical ignition source and saying, "Move that immediately, or we shut your doors today."
Oh.
When the system fails to enforce its own bureaucracy, the physical reality catches up. And in this horrific case, the cost was 5 human lives.
It is a deeply sobering reminder that industrial regulations are almost always written in blood.
Yeah, sadly they are.
And right now, the regulatory and healthcare systems are fighting a desperate battle on a completely different front. The dengue crisis in Sri Lanka has reached a terrifying milestone. Cases have now officially topped 77,000.
It's staggering.
The health minister has issued a stark warning that the risk of transmission will remain incredibly high for at least the next 3 weeks.
77,000 cases is not just an outbreak. It is a full-blown epidemic that threatens to completely collapse the healthcare infrastructure. You have to consider the compounding ripple effects here.
Like what?
Hospitals completely run out of physical beds, national blood banks are depleted trying to manage hemorrhagic fever cases, and the medical staff are pushed to the absolute brink of physical and mental exhaustion.
We are seeing the cracks in the infrastructure directly. The Lady Ridgeway Children's Hospital has had to issue an urgent public plea urging parents to ensure they bring all key medical documents with them because of the massive, chaotic surge in admissions.
It's a triage nightmare.
They are trying to triage terrified children as fast as humanly possible, and a missing piece of medical history slows down life-saving intravenous treatment.
And in the midst of this overwhelming crisis, there is a frantic scramble for scientific intervention. A special expert committee is currently evaluating the Japanese-manufactured Dengue vaccine to determine if it is suitable for immediate deployment in Sri Lanka.
I can't even fathom the logistics of this. Evaluating a brand new foreign vaccine while the hospitals are overflowing with 77,000 cases must be an incredible scientific hurdle.
It is arguably one of the hardest things a public health system can attempt. You cannot simply import crates of a new vaccine and start injecting people in the middle of a hot zone.
Right, there are protocols.
The scientific committee has to evaluate the vaccine's specific efficacy against the exact localized strains of dengue currently circulating in Sri Lanka. They have to assess the cold chain storage requirements, like can the existing overtaxed electrical infrastructure keep this vaccine at the precise required temperature from the port to a rural clinic?
Especially with power cuts.
Exactly. And they have to determine the safety and side effect profile for the local demographic. Executing that level of rigorous double-blind scientific evaluation while the emergency rooms are physically overflowing requires extraordinary bureaucratic and scientific agility.
And unfortunately, the tragic news doesn't end with dengue or the industrial fire. We are also reporting the death of U.S. actress Kaylee Hoddle, who gained fame for her role in the Godzilla vs. Kong movies. She died in a car crash at just 18 years old.
Just heartbreaking. So young.
And closer to home, a horrific accident occurred when a three-wheeler plunged deep into the Mohini Ella ravine from Nalathania. 2 people were killed instantly, and 2 children were critically injured.
These events, while isolated incidents, heavily contribute to the overall emotional exhaustion of today's news cycle. They just underscore the absolute fragility of life in an unpredictable world.
Which is perhaps exactly why there is such a desperate systemic push to protect the environment that sustains us. Today, the new National Environmental Act officially came into force, granting much broader regulatory powers.
It's a big step forward.
At the highest levels of government, a special cabinet panel is actively reviewing national preparedness for the impending impacts of El Niño. And on the ground, real physical action is happening. 8 tons of coastal plastic waste, meticulously collected all the way from Jaffna down to Yala, is being sent for industrial recycling today under the direct supervision of MIPA Chairman Saman.
This is where we have to connect the dots between the environment and the health tragedies we just analyzed. El Niño isn't just a weather phenomenon that makes it slightly hotter. It fundamentally alters global monsoon patterns.
Right, which causes flooding.
Altered, erratic monsoons create massive, unpredictable pools of stagnant water. And stagnant water is the primary breeding ground for the dengue vector mosquito. Those mosquitoes are currently driving the 77,000 hospitalizations.
Ah, I see the connection now.
So when the cabinet panel sits down to review El Niño preparedness, they aren't just talking about crop yields, they're desperately trying to model public health logistics.
And the plastic recycling ties directly into that as well.
Exactly. The 8 tons of plastic waste being recycled isn't just an aesthetic project to make the beaches look pretty for tourists. A single discarded plastic bottle cap on a beach can collect enough rainwater to act as a micro-breeding ground for dozens of dengue mosquitoes.
Wow.
Removing 8 tons of that plastic is quite literally removing millions of potential disease vectors from the ecosystem. Every single action is deeply interconnected.
And managing the fundamental resources of that ecosystem is becoming a daily struggle. We're seeing a 4-hour water cut implemented in several candy areas today just to manage dwindling supply levels.
Yeah, resource scarcity is a growing reality.
On the proactive health policy front, Prime Minister Dr. Harini Amarasuriya met with a high-level UK delegation focused specifically on the logistics of total rabies eradication. But behind all these specific, localized health initiatives lies a much broader, deeply concerning global trend. The fact that nutritious, vital food is increasingly becoming a luxury item globally.
This is one of the most insidious, silent crises of our era. It isn't a sudden explosion or a rapid, highly visible viral outbreak. It is the slow, quiet creeping of global malnutrition.
How is it creeping up so quietly?
Well, as global supply chains falter, remember the exploding tankers and the Strait of Hormuz driving up shipping costs, and as inflation remains stubbornly high, remember the 6.5% rate we discussed the economics of food drastically warp?
Right.
The cost of highly processed, basic, calorie-dense, low-nutrient food remains somewhat stable. But the cost of fresh vegetables, high-quality proteins, and nutrient-dense whole foods absolutely skyrockets.
So people are just forced to buy the processed stuff.
Exactly. We're entering a chilling era where adequate, disease-preventing nutrition is becoming strictly stratified by wealth on a global scale.
It is a profoundly heavy realization to see biological health dictated entirely by macroeconomic wealth. We constantly try to use modern policy and incredible technological leaps to mitigate these inequalities, which brings us to our final exploration today: tech, society, and the sporting weight.
Yeah, this is a fascinating pivot.
And the contrast we are about to look at is absolutely mind-bending. Let's look at the absolute pinnacle of modern life-saving medicine. Sri Lanka has just successfully performed its first ever AI-enabled surgery, utilizing a highly advanced robotic arm.
This is nothing short of a medical renaissance. But we have to clarify what this technology is, because it sounds like science fiction.
Yeah, when I hear robotic arm, I picture a machine doing the surgery by itself.
Right. But an AI-enabled robotic arm does not replace the human surgeon. It radically augments them. The AI filters out the natural, microscopic physiological tremors of the human hand. It can overlay incredibly detailed 3D MRI scans onto the physical tissue of the patient in real time on a monitor.
That's incredible.
And allows the surgeon to make incisions and sutures with sub-millimeter precision that the human hand simply cannot achieve alone. Mechanically, it means vastly faster recovery times, significantly less physical trauma to the body, and surgical outcomes that were practically impossible a decade ago.
Okay, so I want you, the listener, to hold that thought in your mind. Imagine the incredible, life-saving technological leap of an AI robotic arm performing delicate surgery in a hospital in Colombo.
Yeah.
Now, hold that image right next to this piece of news. In France, lawmakers are overwhelmingly expected to pass a bill completely and aggressively banning social media access for all children under the age of 15.
Right.
And Sri Lanka is exploring the exact same restrictive path. MP Fazer Mustafa has introduced a private member's bill to outright ban social media for children under 16 here.
This raises an important question, doesn't it?
It really does. Look at those two realities. Are we simultaneously embracing technology as a savior in the operating room, but actively criminalizing its use in the classroom?
This is perhaps the defining philosophical and regulatory question of the modern era. What you are identifying is the immense friction between technology as a tool and technology as an environment.
What is the difference between the two?
Well, the AI robotic arm is a tool. It has a highly specific, constructive purpose. It is controlled by a rigorously trained professional with decades of experience, and crucially, it is turned off when the surgery is over.
Okay, and social media.
Social media, on the other hand, is an environment. It is fully immersive. It is algorithmically engineered by supercomputers to be psychologically addictive, and it deliberately preys on the underdeveloped dopamine receptors of an adolescent brain to maximize engagement time for ad revenue.
So it's basically a trap.
Exactly. The sweeping legislation in France and the proposed bill in Sri Lanka are not anti-technology movements. They are anti-exploitation movements. Society is finally legally drawing a boundary, recognizing that the human brain, particularly before the age of 15 or 16, simply lacks the necessary cognitive defenses to safely navigate a digital environment that is weaponized to monetize their attention.
It is a profound, almost desperate societal correction. And as the world tries to rapidly figure out these new digital boundaries, our physical borders are also shifting in response to global pressures. Taiwan has just announced new, significantly stricter visa rules specifically for Sri Lankans.
Yeah, that's going to complicate travel for a lot of people.
It will. We also have some lighter yet fascinating stories showing the bizarre intersection of society and tech. In Bangkok, a regular citizen has become a massive TikTok hero simply by filming and publicly solving the city's infamous, chaotic parking nightmares, effectively crowdsourcing civic traffic enforcement.
That's amazing. People using the platform for good.
Yeah. And in the realm of strange pop culture economics, original prop dragon eggs from the hit show Game of Thrones are heading to the auction block, with bidding expected to reach astronomical, logic-defying numbers.
I can only imagine what those will go for.
Right. But tech always carries a dark shadow. Locally, police have had to issue a stern, urgent warning urging vehicle rental firms to drastically tighten their security protocols because there is a massive, highly organized rise in fraud utilizing incredibly sophisticated fake documents.
That specific warning shows how the democratization of technology empowers criminal elements just as fast as it empowers society. A fake document today isn't a sloppy, misspelled photocopy glued together in a basement.
Right, it's high-tech now.
It can be a digitally perfect, biometric-evading forgery generated by artificial intelligence in minutes. The police warning to rental firms is a stark microcosm of the broader security nightmare we face in a purely digital age.
But amid all this intense digital anxiety, geopolitical churn, and crushing economic stress, humanity still desperately looks to the physical world to sports as the ultimate global unifier and occasionally the ultimate tribal divider.
Absolutely. Sports are the great release valve.
And the sporting world delivered an absolute spectacle this week. The FIFA World Cup 2026 has officially concluded. Spain has won their second World Cup title, defeating the fiercely defending champions Argentina 1-0.
What a match that was.
And it took a grueling, exhaustingly tense extra-time goal by Ferran to finally break the deadlock.
That final match was an absolute masterclass in tactical endurance and psychological warfare. You had Argentina defending their title with the immense, almost mythological weight of Messi's legacy driving them, playing with raw, kinetic passion.
Yeah, they were relentless.
But Spain utilized their classic, suffocating, relentlessly calculated, possession-based game. To have the match remain scoreless until extra time speaks to the sheer physical brutality and mental exhaustion both teams endured on that pitch.
And from a pure historical perspective, regardless of the final score, Kylian Mbappe made incredible history by winning his second Golden Boot of the tournament, cementing his status as perhaps the most lethal, defining forward of his entire generation.
Yeah, Mbappe is just on another level.
It was a beautiful display of human ability, but the beautiful game had a very, very ugly finish. The tension of the final descended into sheer chaotic hooliganism, both in the stands and spilling out into the streets outside the stadium.
Which, sadly, perfectly reflects the immense, almost dangerous tribal pressure cooker that the World Cup has become.
It's so intense.
When entire nations project their collective identity, their economic frustrations, and their national pride onto 11 players running on a pitch, the sudden release of that tension, whether through the ecstatic elation of Spain or the crushing, agonizing heartbreak of Argentina, often fractures and combusts into physical violence. It is the dark, unavoidable shadow of global sporting nationalism.
It truly is. And just to recap the incredible path to that chaotic final, earlier in the tournament, we saw a truly thrilling match where Switzerland knocked out Colombia in a penalty shootout to reach the last 8.
That was a nail-biter.
But the sporting news dominating the headlines isn't just football today. Let's look at cricket. England put on an absolutely dominant, historic display, making their highest ever score at Lord's, and they managed to hold off a relentless India to decisively seal the series.
We have to appreciate the context of that achievement. Lord's is widely considered the spiritual home of cricket. To set a highest ever historical score at that specific venue against a bowling attack as formidable and deeply experienced as India's is a monumental generational achievement for the English squad.
It's unheard of.
It requires an absolute perfect, rare alignment of pitch conditions, individual batting form, and flawless strategic execution.
Closer to home, we have some deeply bittersweet news in athletics. Yupun Abikun, famously known and beloved as South Asia's fastest man, has officially brought the curtain down on his magnificent career.
Yupun's retirement is a highly significant reflective moment for Sri Lankan sports. His legacy isn't just about the hardware or the medals he won, it is about the psychological barrier he absolutely shattered.
Because he proved it could be done.
Exactly. For decades, there was an internalized belief that athletes from this specific region simply couldn't physically compete at the highest elite levels of global sprinting. By stepping onto those tracks and holding his own against the world's best, he completely dismantled that myth. He inspired an entire generation of young athletes to literally run faster, to believe that the global stage was accessible to them.
And you can already see that inspiration bearing fruit in completely different arenas. In racing, young Yevon David has just achieved Sri Lanka's first ever podium finish on the incredibly cutthroat, highly competitive F3 stage.
That's just phenomenal.
He is quite literally inspiring a nation with the steering wheel in his hands, proving that the talent pool here is vast and varied. But as always, sports also brings intense controversy. In rugby, Argentina's coach has furiously quit the conference, slamming what he called a deeply disrespectful England side.
Yeah, tensions were running very high there.
And finally, on a hyper-local level in table tennis, Dharmashoka and Mahamaya have fought incredibly hard to win their respective titles.
The whiplash contrast between the massive billion-dollar global stage of the World Cup and the intense, localized, pure passion of the table tennis titles at Dharmashoka and Mahamaya is exactly what makes sports so fundamentally compelling to the human psyche.
Right.
Whether it is a young driver fighting for an F3 podium or a local school tournament played in a gymnasium, it is ultimately about the human pursuit of absolute excellence while under immense crushing pressure.
Excellence under pressure. That really seems to be the defining theme of the entire day, doesn't it? Whether we're talking about a central bank desperately fighting off inflation with an 8.75% rate freeze, a surgeon utilizing an AI robotic arm with sub-millimeter precision to save a life, or a football team battling into extra time with the weight of a nation on their shoulders, we have covered an immense, staggering amount of ground today.
We truly have. And to bring all of these disparate threads back to the center of the web we discussed at the very beginning of the show, I want you, the listener, to pause and just think about the incredible journey of a single physical drop of fuel today.
A single drop of fuel.
Yes. Trace the mechanics of it. That one drop of oil is physically threatened by exploding tankers and complex geopolitical conflict in the Strait of Hormuz.
Okay, that is a profoundly powerful mechanical image to leave on. The global web is vibrating intensely, and every single one of us is feeling the tremors in our own homes. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive today. We know the world is incredibly loud, the anxiety is high, and the information comes at you faster than anyone can process alone. But remember, staying well-informed doesn't have to be a crushing, overwhelming experience. You just have to know how to follow the threads.
Keep questioning the connections. Don't just read the headlines. Keep exploring the deeper mechanical why behind the events that shape our reality.
We'll be right here to help you untangle it all for your next deep dive.